VoltX 100 amp hour lithium prismatic cell battery. If you're watching this today, well then you're probably like me and wondered whether these batteries are really any good. Now today I purchased one and we're going to do a teardown, we'll do a low capacity test, and then finally thoughts on whether these batteries are really worth a look at. I ordered this battery from catch.com. It took about 5 days to get here, and for the price of $375 on sale. I think now they're sitting at around the $399 price, which is still pretty good. The $375 included freight. Comes in a box, obviously. We'll open him up and see what this thing is like inside. Oh, seems to be packaged quite well. A couple of layers of foam. Right, there it is. Throw it away. It's definitely well packaged. As you can see, VoltX 100 amp hour, 12.8 volts. Prismatic cell battery. Comes with some instructions. We'll have a look at that shortly. Quality control sticker. So looking at the top of it, get rid of that. Looks like the posts are epoxied in. 8mm, a little bit on the short side, but hey, you can always replace those. What's it got? Okay, we've got some warnings and stuff on the side. Do not short circuit, do not reverse connections from the charger, do not disassemble, I will pretend we didn't see that, do not throw in a fire or incinerate, do not heat above 60 degrees C. Charging tips: use a lithium battery charger to maximize the charging capacity. When charging with solar, select BO4 mode on solar regulator. Maximum operating voltage is 10 to 14.6 volts. Max charge voltage is 14.6, and all the other regular sort of crap. So it doesn't look too bad. We'll weigh it, see how much it weighs. So I've broken the luggage scale out. We'll lift him up. That's measuring in at 11.5, which is pretty well about what they say on their website. So that's not too bad. The supplied or shipped voltage is sitting at around 13 volts, so it needs charging, which we'll do shortly after we cut it open. So I'm going to go get some gear and I'll start cutting into this. Before I start cutting into the battery, I thought I'd take a bit of time just to see how good the Chinese English conversion is on the in the information sheet that they send you. Just reading through it briefly, it doesn't seem too bad, except for the very last one in the tips section, which says, if charging via solar, set the charger to lithium battery charge mode. For an ordinary lead acid charger, you'll need to charge your lithium battery for more than 10 hours. Ever, if the battery is showing full charge, I don't know what that means, to obtain 80 to 90% capacity from your battery. If unplugged for less than 10 hours, you will likely only reach 50% capacity. Well, I guess if it is unplugged, it's not going to charge. Just on some of the specs, which obviously is limiting this battery to be probably a really good battery, is the standard discharge current is 50 amps, which really means you probably can't use it on a high capacity inverter. Maximum charge current is 50 amps, but remember that's maximum charge current. Standard charge current, they're saying, is 50. Well, we'll see. I think I can only put about 30 amps with my charger in. Maximum continuous discharge current is 50, and maximum discharge current for 5 seconds is 100 amps. It has this 11.6 kilos, which is pretty well close to what I measured it to be. Everything else looks pretty good. Charge method constant current, constant voltage, which is common for a lithium battery. They recommend a 14.6 volt 20 amp charger, which is a bit different from the standard charge current, but anyway. And it makes no state whether you can use the batteries in parallel or series whatsoever. But if you have a look on Outback's website, they say that they can't be used in parallel or series. Now, I can't see why you can't use these in parallel. As long as you charge the batteries up and equalize them, make sure they're both equally charged beforehand, and draw no more than 50 amps from them, because I don't think giving them a parallel setup would give you 100 amps. I think you'd probably find your BMS in one of the batteries might give you a bit of grief. Okay, we'll start cutting into this battery, eh? So after a little bit of mucking around with a hacksaw blade that wasn't in a frame, I managed to cut the battery open just where the top of the battery meets the bottom case. It came apart pretty easy, and we'll have a look inside, eh? There you have it. The internals of the new prismatic cell VoltX battery, which surprisingly enough looks very much like the photo on their website. The BMS is sitting on top there, with your 4 lithium cells sitting up, prismatic cells sitting underneath it. It has a metal bracket which is supporting or holding the cells all together. It looks to be also stopping the cells from moving, and sort of just sits under the top of the lid here. The cables are covered in a fiberglass shield. The lugs are crimped with 8-gauge cable, and the balance cables are just randomly tied there, which probably isn't that good. The BMS looks, all spinning around, is a JBD-HPO4S024, size 120 by 60. Now I believe that refers to the length and width measurement of the BMS. I had a bit of a quick Google on it, and JBD do a lot of BMSs, and this one is rated for 60 amps. So they've obviously slightly underrated, which is good. The case itself appears to be about 5mm thick. It's quite sturdy. It has some little bit of foam packing down the side here. The battery itself is quite firmly in the case, so it's not going to vibrate and rattle around. The balance cables, the plug is glued in. Now there is no battery temperature sensor, so obviously you can't use these in really cold climates. You can see where it would be soldered in. That'll be something you'd have to take into consideration depending on where you live. The only problem I had in cutting it open was this lug is really close to the side of the case. Okay, well, I'll try and slide the cells out and we'll have a look at the rest of the battery. Right, let's see if we can get this out. There we go. The mat's moving off. Okay, you can see the metal frame holding all the cells together. There's the end plate to stop it from sliding forward and backwards. One thing that's quite noticeable is one cell is definitely a different color, which makes me think that these are probably second-hand cells. There's probably no way in the world they could put brand new A-grade cells in these batteries for this price. You can see inside the case, you've got a bit of foam, and the wall of the case is definitely good. You could strap these down quite tightly and not worry about damaging the battery or the cells inside. Okay, the BMS is mounted on the steel plate, heatsink underneath it. There is fiberboard underneath the metal packing strap. It's also taped together and has fiberboard in between the cells. So that's actually not too bad. having a look at the post end of the cells, you can see there's alloy bus bars, which look roughly around 2 mil thick. All the studs are all glued, stop them from coming undone. The BMS cables are run reasonably good, they're crimped and they're screwed into place. There's not really much more you could ask from it for a cheap battery. The quality is actually pretty impressive. Let's measure the individual cell voltage. Right there. First one is 3.296. The next one is 3.295. Next one is 3.296. And the last cell is 3.288, which is a little bit low, but I think the BMS is mainly balanced is within 10 millivolts, so that's pretty well about it. We'll see if it comes up in voltage once we charge it, but if that's starting to sit slightly low on the other ones, that could lead to cell imbalance if your battery isn't charged properly, from what I found in the past. Right, I'll hook up the Red Arc battery charger I've got and we'll see how long it takes to charge up. After a little bit of mucking around, I now have the Manager 30 wired into our cut open VoltX battery. We have currently 32 amps going into the battery. It's now 10:52, so we'll see how long it takes for this battery to charge up from its transported state of charge. We'll do a quick temperature check. Nothing seems to be feeling hot. The case of the batteries isn't hot. The crimp lugs aren't hot. That's all good. Another thing I did note while I was connecting up the battery is there is a date on these batteries. As you can see, 21/07/13. Now that's either these cells are really old, they're all dated around the same date, but I believe the Chinese do their date differently to ours, which is year, month, day. So these batteries could be tested, manufactured, stolen, whatever, on the 2021 7th month 13th day. Hopefully that's all right, or at 10 years old they probably ain't got much life left in them, but we'll find out. Right, the battery's been on charge for over 3 hours now. It actually cut out on, the BMS cut it out on high voltage disconnect, which is quite surprising. The charger actually hadn't stopped trying to charge it. It was sitting on absorption mode on the red vision display here, and the reason why it's cut out on high voltage disconnect is this cell here is actually sitting at 3.56 volts, and the rest of the cells are sitting at 3.35, the right way around, 3.39 and 3.3. So these three other cells have not reached full charge capacity, which is a bit disappointing. So I guess when we do a load test, or capacity test I should say, on these batteries, I'll be surprised if it makes its rated capacity. What needs to be done is the cells need to be top balanced by taking the bus bars off, connecting them all in parallel and charging them up that way. With this will probably fix the problem for a while, but due to the batteries probably not having the same internal resistance, it's going to be an ongoing problem. So for me, this battery looks to be a failure, but we'll load test it and see what happens. Okay, I've been running the test now for about half an hour. The battery's sitting at 74% capacity, running around about 43 amps out of it through my 600 watt inverter running a hairdryer. Now everything's running really hot in here today. It's hot outside. It's 38 degrees. The BMS on the back of the battery is running at around 40 degrees. My inverter is running at around about 50. So I have to bring in the portable room air conditioner to keep things cool. Now at my calculations, at 43, oops, get the screen up, 43 amps, we should roughly run around about 2 and a bit hours before it shuts down on low voltage. So we'll let this run and see what happens, eh? Now at the halfway mark on the battery capacity almost, and it's run for an hour and 8 minutes. See if I can get the shine off that. So it looks like it might just squeeze in its capacity. Wrong way. Sitting at 12.4 volts, and now we're cranking at 40 degrees. I guess we'll run it for another hour and see if it makes it. By my calculations, it should run for a total time of 2 hours and 18 minutes to reach the 100 amp hour capacity at the average of 43.5 amps. 2 hours and 7 minutes into the test, and we're down to 8%. The current is dropped back slightly to 42 amps. Wrong way. And we're running at 12 volts. So if we can make it to 618, by my calculations, we would have pulled exactly 100 amps. We've currently done over 87 amp hours, so definitely nothing to really complain about there. We'll see how long it runs for. So after 2 hours and 22 minutes, the BMS shut the battery down at a cell voltage of 2.45 volts and a grand total of 101 amp hours at an average of 43 amps an hour. I really can't complain about the capacity of this cheap VoltX battery. Now, the cells themselves are quite unbalanced voltage wise, up to 100 millivolts difference between the cells. This could be an issue, but when you think about it, at the same price as a good AGM battery, and to have a battery that charges faster than an AGM battery, this battery went from third charge to fully charged in 2 hours, which is you could never do on an AGM battery without killing it. So all in all, my view of this battery is, yes, it isn't the best battery in the world. It's cheap for a reason, but will it do the job that you ask of it? Yes, it will. You will get 100 amp hours out of it. And when you think about it, the average camper like myself who camps and moves most nights won't ever need 100 amp hour capacity in a 12-hour period or 24-hour period of camping. But one thing to note, these batteries are that cheap that you can buy 2 of them and balance the batteries up by charging each battery up individually and to the same voltage, and then joining the batteries together and leaving them sit before installing them so they're balanced out completely. And I think you'll be right. If they fail in 3 years, so what? An AGM could fail in 3 years' time, and that's even expensive ones. So I hope this was of some help to you, and to me, I'm quite happy with the results of the battery. Will it last? Probably not, but if I get 3 years out of it, and if it fails between now and then, I'll let you know. Cheers for now. One last thing I should do before I call it quits with this video is test the high current disconnect of this battery. Now, It's a feature that all BMSs should have on lithium batteries because they can discharge so rapidly. Any battery can if you short out the cables, quite frankly, and you should always install a auxiliary battery with a fuse on your main positive. This is something that I do with every battery that I install in a camper, just to make sure if something does go wrong with the wiring, it is protected and you're not going to have lots of smoke let out of the wires. Now, this battery, according to the specifications, should do at least 100 amps before it disconnects. Now, it's either going to disconnect on low voltage, if it doesn't work on amperage, which will be interesting to see, or it will disconnect on high current. Now, it'll be interesting to see how much current I can draw out of this battery before it disconnects. The thing, if you continuously draw 50 or 60 amps out of this battery, the BMS will get hot and probably shut down on overtemp, which is something we probably could test, but I'm not going to go into that amount of effort. We'll just do a load test. So I'm going to use a carbon pile battery load tester. Obviously you wind in this knob here, which clamps up a carbon pile tighter and allows it to draw current off the battery. The amps will increase on the display, and we can see the volts on the display there go down as the amps go up. So let's have a go and see if we can let some smoke out of this battery or have it disconnect. Now, this has got a fan in it, so it'll get a little bit noisy once the fan cuts in. Here we go. Winding. Here we are. Rightio. We'll settle for a sec. Right. I've got a... Okay, amps are cut in now. 20, 40, 50. Leave it sit on 60 for a little bit. Just maintaining it pretty good. 12.4 volts. 70. We're going to push it up to 100. There we go. Voltage is starting to drop. We've got 170, so I've gone past the limit. It's still cramping up. We're still adding current. And 200 amps. And it's going to cut out on low voltage disconnect. So it didn't so testing it like that, it didn't disconnect on overcurrent. It actually disconnected on low voltage, I would believe, at that sort of voltage that it dropped out on. Now you can see it's disconnected. It's 0.3 of a volt. And if I disconnect the clamp off here, I should be able to let it sit for a few secs and then reconnect it. And we should have some volts back. Let's see what happens. Yep, there we go. Now the battery's voltage is going to be down a little bit because we've drawn a fair bit of current out of it. Now if I give this a quick shunt with the load tester, and it dropped out at 70 amps, which is pretty good. So that simulates a dead short, so you know that the overcurrent disconnect works. And you can draw up to 200 amps with, constantly without actually having it trip out. That's pretty interesting. So you could probably give it a run with a high current inverter for very short periods of time without causing any problem. Let's see how hot the BMS is. Rightio. It's warm to touch, especially on the main battery negative side. But yeah, not too bad. Not like it's going to catch on fire or cause any problems. The cables are not too hot at all. Very, very little temperature rise in those. So I think, like in the end, with this battery, you'd be probably, money well spent, unless you're a person that goes to really remote areas and really needs to rely on battery power. I probably wouldn't buy it for that, but for me, who goes away for 2 weeks, 4 weeks at a time and not really hit the remote places, it's definitely, a battery worth considering to throw in your van. I'm actually going to do a part 2 now, where I'm going to parallel 2 of these batteries together. I'm going to show you how to do that. We'll see if it actually will parallel up, because according to the VoltX website, you can't. From what I understand, there should be no reason why you can't if it's done properly. And then we'll install a cell balance port so I can externally balance each individual cells, because these cells discharge so differently from each other that I think the cell imbalance is going to be an issue with this battery. When I recharge this battery after our load test, as in our amp hour testing, it actually cut out on one battery really badly. So I'm going to charge up with an actual cell charger to charge each cell individually. We'll see how long each one takes in the next video, and then we'll go from there and install it in my van. Okay, cheers.